Welcome to Romance Files. Please like this video and subscribe to Romance Files. I kinda saw this coming, but I wasn't as emotionally ready as I thought. The lack of affection, respect, and her outright refusal to be close with me all pointed to one thing. She either had an affair, was thinking about it, or just got tired of being my wife. I decided to let her go, and over the past few months, she seemed more okay with that. What I couldn't understand was why she didn't just leave. Why drag it out? Just say goodbye and move on. I didn't transfer any money because we didn't have much. We lived in a debt-free house only because it belonged to my grandmother, and we moved in after she passed away. Even then, I noticed some things I didn't like. I talked to my parents, and they agreed to keep the house in their name for at least a year, just to be safe. We had our own house once, but the bank owned it. We lived there for 6 years before Sandy. One evening, she drank too much wine and fell asleep, leaving a bunch of candles burning. One was too close to the curtains. The fire alarm woke her up, and she managed to escape, but by then, the whole living room was on fire. The firefighters got there around the same time I did. I told them about my weapons and ammunition stored in the house. After hearing a few gunshots, they stepped back to a safe distance and let the house burn. One of my best friends was the captain of that station, and he wrote in the report that the fire was too far along when they arrived, which helped with the insurance claim. Apparently, the insurance policy didn't cover stupidity because they paid out, leaving us with a clean sum of about $30,000. It was more than I thought we'd get, so we took it and moved into my grandmother's house. We still had around $20,000 left, and she'd get half of that, enough to start living in a decent apartment. I would have stayed where I was. I did a few more things, and if we split up, she would be very disappointed. As I said, I expected it. I just didn't expect it to be so cold. I worked a different shift. My hours were later than hers. It was winter, and in my area, it got dark pretty early. I noticed her car wasn't in the garage and the porch light wasn't on. I entered, calling her name. She didn't respond, and I found her at the vanity applying makeup. She wore a dress, not the kind I was used to, completely new, with a higher hem and a lower neckline. I watched her for a few minutes as she ignored me. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked. "No, it's me. I have a date." She expected an explosion, but it didn't come. I just stared at her until she got nervous. "Did you hear me? I said I have a date." "No," I replied. "No means no. You can date, sleep with whoever you want once you move out. I'll file the papers as soon as I can, but you won't do it while we're living under the same roof. Why don't you pack some things and stay somewhere else for a few days? Give me time to figure things out, and then we can talk about how to divide everything." She laughed, sounding almost like a crow. "I'm not leaving. I like this house, and when it's mine, I'll decorate it how I want. If you prove you're weak, I'll get most of the money when we have to sell. Do us both a favor and move in with your parents until this is sorted out." "No, you need to leave." "Oh, I will, in about 30 minutes. Don't come here when I'm back, or I'll call the police. I'm sure I can come up with something to get you kicked out. I heard they'll detain you for 48 hours for domestic violence. I think by then I can change the locks and get a restraining order." She was a bit shaken when I smiled. "Whatever you think, don't do that." "I'm serious, Henry. This is settled, and now if you'll excuse me, I need to fix this lipstick. This bright red has to be the perfect shade. It should complement the ring around its base, don't you think?" I just smiled and left the bedroom. I knew she didn't have the courage to ask him to pick her up, which meant she was planning to meet him. I walked through the garage, grabbed the aluminum baseball bat I used during the summer, and 4 good swings took care of her headlights and taillights. She won't be driving this car. I returned and saw her purse on the counter. I opened it and saw 6 packs of rubber bands. As I pulled out her phone, not wanting to make a mess, I took the phone to the garage, put it on the workbench, grabbed a hammer, and smashed it into 3 pieces. I almost stuck push pins in the rubber bands but stopped, thinking she might blame me for it. She came into the kitchen as I was pouring coffee, wearing the highest heels I had ever seen. When she saw me, she frowned and shouted, "Get out!" while pointing to the door. I just smiled and took a sip of coffee. She sighed and said, "Fine, if that's what you want. Look for cops around here soon. Maybe you want to call your dad to bail you out when you can." I took another sip of coffee. "Why would the cops come? I didn't threaten you. I didn't lay a hand on you. All I did was refuse to let you kick me out of my own house." "That's not what I'll tell the cops. You threatened me when I asked for a divorce and insulted me. I fear for my life. They always believe the woman." "I'm not kidding, Henry. You have about 30 minutes before I call." She stomped away as much as she could in those heels. 5 minutes later, shouts were heard through the door. She burst in, and the expression on her face made me a little nervous. "Ah, what did you do to my car? How did you assume I damaged your car? You shouldn't leave it parked on the street like that." For a second, she just stared at me. "Never mind. I'll just call him to pick me up. I'll even let you watch as I kiss him goodbye when we leave. Don't be surprised if you don't see my head when we drive away." It was my turn to make her nervous, so I smirked and said, "Sure, call him. It'll give us a chance to get to know each other better. I can tell him how crazy you can be. I hope he doesn't have long-term plans because you're showing him that marriage vows don't mean much to you." She raised her voice a few decibels when she found her phone wasn't working. She returned in sneakers, carrying the heels. "Have a nice evening," I said, smiling. "You'll get yours." I still heard her cursing as she walked down the street. It was almost too much when I saw her knock on the first door and not be let in. She must have repeated this for a quarter of a block until she realized no one was going to help her. "Thanks, Mom," I called her when I figured it all out, and she contacted all the neighbors. I grew up on this street. Everyone knew and liked me, not so much her. I knew she would soon approach the phone, so I sat back and waited. It took the police about 20 minutes to respond. At that time, I didn't know she had returned, staying in the shadows, waiting for the police to arrive. I knew one of the officers, the girl I graduated high school with. I invited them in, offered them a cup of coffee. They seemed a bit uneasy. "Let me guess, you came because of a domestic disturbance call? See any broken furniture? Any scratches on my fingers or torn clothes?" They shook their heads. "Then why do you think anything happened?" She said, "You threatened her, Henry. She claims you said you'd ruin her life when she told you she was leaving." "I'm sorry, Henry, but the law is clear. We have to arrest you." "Oh God, that sounds serious. How serious is giving false statements?" The man spoke first. "If you have any evidence of that, now would be the time to show us." So I showed them the video taken with a mobile phone camera. Both cops frowned. "Well, Henry, this gives you plenty of options. Perjury is not in your hands. It depends on us. However, you can use the video to obtain a restraining order. You can clearly hear her say, 'You'll get yours.' A clear threat if we ever heard one. It seems you guys don't need to be in close proximity right now. You can apply tomorrow and use our names as evidence. Meanwhile, if you have any way to secure the house so she can't return, that might be a good idea. If she comes back, give us a call. And Henry, I remember how sweet you can be when someone offends you, so let's not let it go to court and be done with. Do you hear what I'm saying?" "Yes, ma'am." Sweet cheeks. "Oops, sorry. I know no one has called you that since high school, especially now that you carry a weapon. Old habits, you know? Whoever is in your life right now is lucky." Heather blushed and left. "It seems I've suddenly gotten really good at annoying any woman I talk to." The guy smirked. "Sweet cheeks, huh? She just went through a terrible divorce. You're not the only one with a spouse wanting to date. Please don't make us come back tonight." They didn't need to come back. While I was talking to the cops, my loving wife sneaked into the garage with a brilliant idea of taking my car. The flaw in this plan was that she left her keys on the kitchen table and couldn't get in with the police. Then she saw them. I always kept a set of keys to the monster on the workbench. That's what she called it when she saw it for the first time. It was an old but in perfect condition, full-size, four-wheel drive SUV from 1989. I think you could fit both our other cars in it. We only used it when I needed to tow something with my trailer, 2 or 3 times in the summer to tow a friend's pontoon for fishing, and as a snowplow. What she didn't account for was that I disconnected the garage opener chain in case exactly this happened, to keep her from getting in. She started the beast. The sound was incredibly loud in the small space. She hit the garage opener button and waited until she thought it had lifted. Then she released the clutch, trying to leave as quickly as possible. She should have turned on the light, because she didn't realize the garage door was open. The garage door couldn't handle the power of the 454 engine or the torque of the beast in low gear. She slammed backward with a sound of screeching metal right into the front of a police car. She had enough momentum to push the car back a few feet, causing a lot of damage to the front. Heather reached for the car door as the beast burst out of the garage. 5 more seconds, and it could have ended very badly. Her partner wasn't as lucky. He opened the door and was about to get in when she crashed into the patrol car, and the door knocked him about 10 feet down the driveway. Heather, being a redhead, had a temperament that matched her hair. As I rushed upstairs to check on Officer Jones, she was pulling my loving wife out of the monster by her hair, screaming all the time, "Down!" My loving wife, by the way, Ginger, if anyone cares about her name, was largely out of it and just groaned once they cuffed her. Heather rushed to her car and turned on the radio. "Officer down. Send help to 411 Elm Drive right now." Officer Jones was unconscious. Most of the impact hit his face, and it was quite clear his nose was broken. I gently cradled his head in case of spinal injuries so he wouldn't choke on his own blood. I must have held his head for about 20 minutes before the first ambulance arrived. 10 minutes later, it looked like a police assembly. All the on-duty officers were there. Heather went with Officer Jones to the hospital as her car was out of commission. After giving a statement to the detective and directing him to me, Ginger got a free ride in the ambulance too, due to some bruises, a couple of injuries from the airbag, and a pretty good bruise. I repeated all of this 4 times before they were satisfied. Being a small town, I knew a couple of police officers, including the chief, my friend's dad. He was our baseball coach when we were in high school. "Hey, any news on Officer Jones, coach?" "Nothing definite, Henry, but for now, it doesn't look too bad. They'll know more after they do the MRI and x-rays." I thanked him and was about to leave when he called me back. "Just so you know, Your wife seems to be okay. If you could call the charges against her fine, that is. How do you charge someone with extreme stupidity? Here are the consequences. Ginger got out on bail, went to the bank, and withdrew $99, leaving me with $1,000. She needed the money to pay back her parents' bail and hire a good lawyer. I still had a restraining order in place, so we communicated through our attorneys. Our first meeting went extremely poorly for her. I had my parents and my lawyer with me because their contribution was relevant to the case. The lawyer listed her demands. She needs a house, or at least half its value. I knew she had made a deal with a friend, a realtor, to buy it for her, and then sell it back, using her share of the proceeds for the down payment. She knew I would never agree to sell it to her. My lawyer handed a paper to her attorney. He seemed surprised, and Ginger screamed. "What?" Her lawyer explained to her, "The house belongs to his father. His name is nowhere in the documents. You can't get half of what doesn't belong to you." She was still boiling with anger when he stated the next demand. "My client wants all new furniture in the house. Living room, dining room furniture from all bedrooms, silverware, and new kitchen appliances." My lawyer responded with more documents. Everything we bought was paid by check from my father's account. We would pick something. I would drive it to her place, pick up Dad in his truck, he'd write a check, and I'd give him the cash. All the rented furniture belongs to the homeowner, so none of it is ours to keep. But he agreed to let you choose one of the bedrooms, probably for old time's sake. In the end, almost everything we owned was out of her reach. I fixed her car the following weekend and took it to her parents' house, only to find out they had left to post bail for their daughter. During the divorce, the judge called me and my lawyer into his office to review the papers. He tried to hide a smirk but couldn't quite. "Clever boy," he said. "You cut her legs right from under her. You knew this would happen, didn't you?" I shrugged. I didn't quite envision this scenario, but I knew it wouldn't end well. I was just defending myself by all the rules. She owes me $9,000 of that money she took, but if she just signs the papers, we'll be even. He grumbled, "Fair enough." Back in the courtroom, he told Ginger everything was documented and legal, and there was nothing he could do about it. But I agreed to let her keep all the money she took if she just agreed to the divorce. If not, I would demand it back. She was furious, but she had no choice. The judge slammed his gavel, and I became a free man. She had to forget about me and focus on her other problems, filing a false police report, assaulting an officer with a vehicle. She got lucky and ended up on probation for a year. I ran into her a month later at Walmart. She wanted to talk, so we ordered drinks at the cafe and sat down. It took her a minute to find her voice. "Why were you so cruel to me?" she asked. "I could ask you the same thing. When did you decide to end our marriage? You could have just broken up with me instead of making the last few months so miserable. And why did you throw your date in my face? You know me well enough to know I wouldn't just give up." She sat quietly for a moment before replying. "I wasn't happy, and I haven't been for a long time. I hated it when our house burned down, hated moving here, hated leaving our friends. That's probably where it all started. Looking back, I realize you're a good guy, and I should have just talked to you. That's probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard from you. I didn't want to go back home either. I liked where we lived. If you gave me even the slightest hint that you wanted to stay, we could have taken the insurance money and bought something else. Even after we moved, we still could have gone back. I think maybe that was part of it, but the truth was you wanted to leave. Why all the song and dance? In the end, I know it wasn't all your fault, but I blamed you for everything. I really didn't care about anyone else. I just wanted to hurt you. I regret how I behaved. You were right. We should have just talked and parted ways amicably." I stood up, finished my drink. "Well, that was eye-opening. You need to see someone, Ginger. You really messed up. I heard you're going back home, so I probably won't see you again. Try to live a better life. If you fall in love with someone else, use what we went through as a lesson." I didn't say goodbye. I just walked away. I saw her again 4 years later at a friend's funeral. She looked almost the same, maybe 5 pounds heavier with longer hair. She saw me and smiled, but we didn't talk. About 2 years after all this turmoil, I ran into Sergeant Sweet Cheeks at the shooting range. We talked, and I learned she was engaged to Officer Jones, who had fully recovered. He got a pretty good compensation from my auto insurance, and he planned to use it for a down payment on a house. 18 months later, I saw her again and asked how she liked married life. It seems he didn't have such a high opinion of me as you do. I caught him with another woman tied to him, and the woman belonged to another man. We parted not on the best terms. I would like to sympathize, but it's not like that. She seemed surprised. "Why not?" "Because now you're free again. I hope I heard you're a detective now. Can you use that excellent brain power to figure out what I'm thinking?" She blushed slightly before laughing. "No, you're lucky. If you really like me and are willing to treat me the way I deserve, you might find that I'm inclined to share what I really like with the right man. Pick me up at 7, wear a suit, and don't talk nonsense. And now shut up and act." I showed up exactly at 7 in my best suit. I don't know if it's genetics or training, but even as foolish as I can sometimes be, I knew better than to complain about it. I didn't put her to bed until we got married, 9 months after our first date. All I can say is that it was worth the wait. Now she's called Sweet Cheeks. I can joke around, but calling her that in public isn't the same, though she likes it when I say it in private. Ginger was seeing a psychologist, but I don't know if it helped. She got married twice, and her second husband seems careful. He keeps her on a tight leash and reminds her of me when she acts up, saying that I'm not the only one who can treat her that way. It seems to help her stay focused, at least according to the cousin who told me about it. All I can say is it's good for her. Our daughter Kelly got married today. We gave her my grandmother's old house as a wedding gift. Heather never liked that house, and when her parents passed away, we moved into their large 2-story farmhouse. Our son Mark will inherit it when we're gone, which I hope won't be anytime soon. After Kelly left for her honeymoon, I surprised my Sweet Cheeks with tickets for a cruise vacation as a gift for our 25th wedding anniversary. She always wanted to go, and I finally saved up enough money for it. We'll spend 2 weeks traveling through Europe, which is her dream vacation. I need to go now. Sweet Cheeks is calling me back to bed, handing me a little blue pill and a glass of water. It looks like it's going to be a very nice vacation.